Hello, welcome to the August 26, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we will get started. Bear with me just for a moment. I'll check audio, make sure everything's coming through as expected. Hello, welcome to the August 26, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. All right, so it sounds like my monitoring computer is coming through as expected. So my name is Greg Undo. I am the host of the Club Cubase live stream. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase you're using, also which level of Cubase. You can say I'm running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. I'm running version 11, 12, 10, 10.5, etc. And which operating system, so whether you're running Mac OS or Windows, and which versions of those, that would be helpful. So when asking questions, my ability to answer the questions in real time will soon be eclipsed by the number of questions. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if you could just simply refrain from asking the same question repeatedly in the chat, it just kind of slows everything down a bit. It would be appreciated. We should have all of the questions, all the topics with an index with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field later tonight. So you could look for that. And if you wanted to search for comments from previous live streams, I think we now have pushed over 20,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to give special thanks to Jan in Stockholm for creating the website to search for all of the data. We want to give special thanks. We have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dudes, that are not Steinberg employees, but they do this kind of out of the kindness of their hearts to make it a better community. And also, we want to give Jazz Dude a special thanks for the Cubase Nation Discord and all his efforts he does with that, kind of enriching knowledge of different tutorials and information and collecting different resources that benefit the Steinberg user. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host for the live stream. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you are watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question from Matt Elliston. Looks like two questions. Says, hi, Greg and Cubase family. Just installed Cubase 12 Pro on a Windows 10 computer, and Halion is not showing up any instruments. So probably what you need to do when doing this, let's say if I wanted to add an instrument track, is come over to, let's say we want to add a Halion 6. So I'm not sure if it's the full version of Halion or the Halion Sonic SE, but we'll do the full version. So say when we want to look at all of our libraries here, so you should be able to, just see all of the different libraries available here. If you don't see that, I would maybe try to go to Media Bay. And then if you look under like VST sound, we could just say, okay, I want it to be hot brass, and make sure that we right click on these and just choose to, you could choose rescan disk, and then that should make that correlation between the Halion and its content. So give that a try, Matt. And second question, is using a second monitor, can I display the faders on this and not under the tracks in the window? So a lot of times we may see the actual mix console here in the lower zone. So let's say if we go to our mix console in the lower zone, but if we hit F3, or if you go to your studio menu, we could see mix console. So now could be a floating window that we could put onto a separate monitor display screen, so that the mixer is always open. It's a very common dual screen mode for Cubase, is the project window here and the mix console on a separate screen that's permanently left open. And if you wanted to kind of upgrade this particular view to full screen mixer, you'll see this little arrow in the upper right hand corner that's pointing upward to the right, and then we could just click there, and at that point we could just toggle back and forth, or just hitting F3, and you could leave that on your secondary display. All right, so we have a question from Jerome Gibson. What's the email address here? So you could always use clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, we see Stefan from Sweden and Trond from Norway. Thanks for joining this afternoon. And we have Benny from Sweden as well. I think I just saw maybe an email coming from Jerome Gibson like a minute or two right before the live stream, and it was about how to drag multiple MIDI files to a particular track. So currently, when we import MIDI files, it's going to be done one at a time. So that's generally how it's going to be handled, is one at a time. So we don't really have the ability to drag and drop multiple MIDI files at once. So. All right, so we see Jan from CubaseIndex.com on from Stockholm. Thanks for being here. All right, and we have Patrick Becker, Filter Freak, who's hiding in the background. We see Jazz Dude, of course. Thank you for all that you do. All right, we have Uno Momento from Finland. Great to have you on. And Best Korean Jesus from San Diego. All right, so we see a question. How can I save MIDI files so that when you import them into Cubase, it opens Halion with the matching instrument in the MIDI part? A lot of MIDI files I have do that when I load them. So when we import MIDI files, we could have it by default open to, if we go to the preferences, and at this point we could choose under MIDI file, and import, we'll see a destination. So we could choose to have this imported to MIDI tracks, not assigned to any instruments, to instrument tracks, or we could have this go and open Halion Sonic SE, which has a general MIDI bank in it, which is often kind of used to play back standard MIDI files. But so it will work with Halion Sonic SE, but there's no automatic way to make it work with Halion. So, but you could have it imported to instrument tracks and have those instrument tracks assigned to Halion. So. But the MIDI file itself doesn't, when you export the MIDI file, it's not instrument specific, because the MIDI file itself is going to be a bit more generic. But as you import it, you can have Cubase open it directly into with Halion Sonic SE. Okay, so we see a question. How do I raise a MIDI note in Groove Agent 5 and percussion drums? This only applies to one note in percussion drums. Hope you understand what I mean. Cubase 12, Windows 10. All right, so let's go ahead and I think maybe in the pattern that we want to have the ability. So we're going to do this in the full Groove Agent. And let's say if we want to kind of make one note within the pattern louder, I guess. So let's go ahead and load up a percussion agent. Okay, so let's say if I'm here. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to change. So let's come over here. Okay, so let's say if I select a particular pattern here. Okay. All right, let's see if we can see if the patterns show up here. Okay, so okay, so say raise a MIDI note in Groove Agent. So if we have this particular pattern here, I know that if we come to a particular pattern that we can and if you wanted to adjust the velocity of programmed patterns, but if we have just, let's say we select a different pattern. So I will just go back to this bank and I'm going to drag this pattern onto my project window. Let me just okay, I'm just going to set this up to record from Groove Agent as my MIDI in. Okay, so let's say I have kind of the pattern, and I'll just take my auto quantize off. Sorry about that. Let me just. And now once we want to come over here to our drum editor, so if this is what you want to do, we could just choose to, let's say, okay, I want to take, and we'll say, okay, we want to only look at velocity. So at this point, we could adjust the velocity for different elements. So once we kind of, so, you know, Groove Agent, we could record the MIDI data directly out from Groove Agent into tracks by setting the MIDI input from your Groove Agent. And then once it's in the MIDI domain, you could also just come over here if you wanted to make different sounds louder, go to the mixer. So if I and each of these will be kind of brought to. So you could also just kind of make individual sounds louder within the mixer as well. So let me know if that helps. All right, we see Gerald Ely checking in from California. We see Peter from Montreal. All right, and we have Soren in, excuse me, in Sweden. All right. We have Mitch Michelle checking in from Michigan, Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Great to have you back. Jeff Zabelski on earlier than he has been recently from Chico, California. We have Teddy checking in from Athens, Greece. All right. We have Zork Production from Belgium. Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, which is always great because that means ice cream is going to start. All right. All right, so we have a question from MR Productions in Holland. So the question is, I cannot hear my metronome click even if I push the button. Do you have a solution? All right, so sometimes the metronome could be turned on and off in two different places. So let's say I turn my metronome on here, but if you're using the control room, the metronome may also be deactivated from the control room. So often when people say that they're not hearing the metronome, it's often they turn this on in maybe the control room, and these work independently of each other. But at this point, make sure that the metronome sound just to the left and kind of the bottom of these three icons here of the big red volume knob in the control room, make sure that you have the click track turned on so that you could hear it directly there. So let me know if that helps. All right, and we have Camille checking in, Vesely checking in from the Czech Republic. Thanks for being with us today. All right, and we see the cube. All right, so his question is, do any of the MPC Akai products work with Cubase? So, I think that they would all work as different instruments and controllers with Cubase. So if they have, and they should be able to sync to MIDI timecode or MIDI clock from that. So, but if you're trying to run it inside of the, Akai MPC, it's not going to do that. But, you could obviously use the Akai MPC as a part of Cubase and in conjunction with it, for playing via controller as well as, playing any of the sounds. All right, and we see Harry Hem, and we see Nick as well on. You see Best Green Jesus also saying that there's Akai scripts in the MIDI remote manager as well. And we see the cube is from San Diego as well as Best Green Jesus. All right, let's have yours. All right, so Michael Teams has already started his ice cream distribution. All right, so we have a question. In the sampler, is there a way to keep it in one-shot mode but have it loop, I guess, at the end of the one-shot so it's a continuous note? Okay, so let's say I will come over here to our sampler control. I'll just drag this in. All right, so now I have just my see if my MIDI keyboard is acting up on me. Here, hang on just 1 second. I'll just do it from another project here quickly. All right, so I'll just okay, so let me just drag. All right, sorry, let me just, so we have our sampler track here. Okay, so let's just put it into continuous loop. So let me just reread the question, just make sure I have it right. Okay, so keep it in one-shot mode, have it loop to the end of the sample so that it's a continuous note. Okay, so let's say okay, so this we have continuous. So I think once it's in, you have kind of the two different choices, but let's see. So let's say. So it's until release, but let's just say. All right, and if we alternate that, we'll just, I think, play it backwards. So I think it's going to be either kind of continuous loop, kind of held down, or it'll just kind of play back the whole thing in one-shot mode. So one-shot mode is usually means that it's going to just play back the particular sample. So I think, those are the different modes. So one shot, I don't know a way to have it automatically just as we just do that to have it continue to loop afterwards. But if you just hold down, let's see if we put it to once, that will only loop it one time. So it's kind of either looping or one shot, but it doesn't look like you could continuously loop from when one shot mode is active that I know of. So. All right, so we see just perhaps a feature request to drop in multiple MIDI files. So yeah, generally, like most people are using MIDI files to kind of transfer kind of whole, entire MIDI composition. So I think that's why, but I'll make sure to include that as a feature request. All right, John Costigan says he needs a like button reminder. So if you do learn a new tip or trick or get a question answered, that you do hit the like button, and it enables us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so we just see a question. Can I change the volume of the metronome Cubase LE 10.5? Greetings from Germany. So there may not be as much flexibility for the metronome, but in 10.5 and Cubase LE, let's see if we go, you might be able to go to, if you go to the transport to metronome setup, you may be able to, once you come over here to the click sounds, to be able to adjust the level here. So let's say, we could adjust the level directly here. So sometimes, I'm not sure if this is in Cubase LE, but let's say if we have a number, let's say we have our project with our left and right locators. One thing you may also have, I'm not sure if this is in LE, but something to try, is if you go to the project to signature track and just say render an audio click between the left and right locators, and then you could have, it'll just generate an audio file, and then you could increase and decrease the volume of that. So there's more options in the more advanced versions, but those are two things that I would try for Cubase LE. All right, so we see question, is there any option available in Cubase to reduce noise? So there's not a specific noise reduction out plugin. Our Wavelab program does that, but sometimes people can utilize spectral layers. So you get a spectral layers 1 with it. And I know, and that does some basic spectral editing that people could use to get rid of noise. But if you wanted to, run spectral layers, and I have the Pro version installed. So as soon as I have the Pro version, I can't run just the spectral layers 1, but if you have the Pro version here, you could have some really extensive noise capability. So if you come over here, you could actually, take an ambience match, or just you could register noise and be able to kind of filter out. I don't think that's in the Spectral Layers 1 version, but you could do some basic spectral editing with Spectral Layers 1 as well. But that's a very effective noise reduction with the Spectral Layers. All right. All right, so we have Ground Level checking in for his very first live stream. Thanks for being here, and please feel free to ask any questions that you have or just absorb some knowledge. And thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Benny, I think I was a bit unclear regarding the Groove Agent 5. It's a matter of raising the key of a conga. All right, so let's take a look. Sorry for misunderstanding. Let me jump back to our previous project here. Let's see if we have some options for that. Okay, so let's say as we're playing. All right, sorry about that. All right, so let's see if I could. Just do a brand new one real quick so it's not routed. All right, so let's see if we come over to edit the instrument. So if we kind of select just, we could come over here. Okay, so let's say if we come here to this one. So at this point, you may have to select which conga it is, but if you come here, so let's say as we're playing. So kind of select. So for each of the different sounds, just click on it, and you may have to select kind of which mode is being hit. And then you could adjust the tuning. So give that a try and let me know if that works for you. Okay. All right, so we have the Mop Man checking in from Baltimore, so not too far from me, just outside of DC. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see, are there Machine Mark III scripts? So I'm not sure if it's the scripts for the, for the MIDI remote, or if you're looking for, if it's just going to be like, running it as a VST plugin, you should be able to see all of the, patch scripts in the particular instrument itself. So, as soon as you open up Machine, I don't run Machine, I don't have a copy of it, but let's say if it's remote scripts, those, once we come over here, you can see all of this patch scripts, if that's what you mean. But if it's going to be the MIDI remote, you could check on the Steinberg forums. There's kind of a collection of different MIDI scripts that have been created, MIDI remote scripts that have been created by users and shared. So you could take a look there. But you could also, we also have sent out all of the, API and the SDKs for the controller companies so that they could create and make really slick implementations of their controllers. So you could always check with NI as well. All right, so we see that Jeff Sabelski, his oboe reeds are soaking as he's watching the early part of the live stream. He's practicing for his part in the Poulenc trio, piano, bassoon, and oboe. Good luck with the performance and your practice. All right, Jeff Sabelski is whacker number 34 of the like button. All right, so we see, can you move the Cubase software app to a hard drive and then move it to another computer? There's really no need to do that because, you could just simply reinstall all of, you could just simply install if you don't want, excuse me, to move all of the content. You could just utilize the, which is the big thing. So, if we want to, let's see if if we go to your Steinberg library manager, so we'll just, excuse me, come over here. Let's say Steinberg library manager. So if it's all the content and instrument samples and loops, at this point, we could just select all of these and move, excuse me, and move them to an external drive to migrate over so that you don't have to re-download all of them again. So you could use the Steinberg library manager if you're kind of migrating to a new system. You don't want to download every bit of content. You could just come right over here and move that. And then on a new machine, just double click on a file and it will launch the Steinberg library manager. You could say, look for this content in this location, and then it'll make the association for you. All right, so we just see. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see from the Cube, because I'm looking to get a keyboard with deep Cubase integration, which Yamaha keyboard should I get considering I want deep Cubase integration? Okay, looking at the Yamaha MOX F6 Motif series. So that's, there's not super deep information for controllers. I believe the MOX F will work as a Mackie control device, so you could use the faders on it in conjunction with a Mackie control, but there's not really any spectacular deep integration over with a Yamaha controller than other controllers, unfortunately. So, but those will give you, some of the Yamahas, some people, are a bit hesitant as a controller because they don't make just a dedicated controller, and sometimes they have like 4 knobs and a shift button that will take the 4 knobs, and you go 1 through 4, hit the shift button, and it's 5 through 8 instead of having 8 knobs on it. So, but you could be spending a lot of money if you want the sounds of the MOX F6. There's wonderful sounds in there, but if you're going to buy it as a controller and not use the sounds, you may be able to save some money otherwise in getting just a dedicated controller. But if you wanted the sounds as well, that's a great way to go. And we see Trond is saying he uses the Panorama P6. Yeah, ironically, it's easier for me to get a Nectar controller from Nectar than for me to get a Yamaha controller in my office. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so I just see, hi everyone, I got a Wavelab related question. Where can I find installer for Wavelab Elements 11.03? It's no longer available on the Steinberg website. Anyone has a copy? If you don't find, if you don't find a copy of it and you need that specific version, if you want to send me an email at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could see if I have it. Sometimes we have internal FTPs that we might be able to get it if you can't find it as well. All right, so we see a question from MR Productions. How do I move events using my keyboard? Okay, so I'm not sure if it's a MIDI keyboard or a computer keyboard. So if you wanted to just nudge events, so let's say if I'm here and I have this particular event, if I just want to nudge, I could nudge by holding down my control or command key plus the left and right arrows. So we could nudge, and as we nudge, we could set this to different values. So if I say, okay, I want to nudge it by beat, or if we wanted to nudge while so we could do it by default, by master, by intervals in the main project window. Or if you want it to be different, we could you could have it nudge in a different time format as well. So when we come over here, we could just say, okay, we want to, nudge left and right. And if you wanted to do that from a MIDI keyboard, you could just assign it using the MIDI remote. So let's say if I wanted this button here to nudge left, And then we could assign this, and we could say this one is going to be nudge -1 bar. So now as I hit these two buttons on my controller, so we could nudge the events or nudge the timeline. So you could do it through the MIDI remote as well. But try just by default Control Command plus the left and right arrows. Okay, so we see a question. Can I remove the locators from a circle range with a key command? Okay, so let's say all right, so all right, so if we have, let's say, markers, I assume, so let's come over here, and I'll just add some markers in. So let's say, okay, so if I'm reading this right, so can I remove the locators from a circle range with a key command? So let's say I have this range selected. So let's come over to project window and go to the project menu to project logical editor. So let's see if we could delete. And we'll say we want to delete markers. And we can say position is outside cycle. So we have these two markers outside of the cycle. So let's see if we hit apply. Yeah, so we could just do that. So I'll go ahead and save that as a preset. So once again, if we have lots of markers here, and we could specify if it's on the selected track, but so if we have that within like our left and right locators, and now we could just delete all the markers that don't fit within that particular range. Let me know if that's if I understood correctly or if I misunderstood. And you could assign a key command to that particular function if you come over here to key commands, and you'll see process project logical editor presets. So you can say delete, markers, delete markers out of range, and assign it to a key command. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button, and Benny saying bang, bang, bang. So apparently he has smashed it. All right, so you see from Clever Villamar, so question about Al poner un fab filter en un track mono and sounds volume, no function at 100%. So maybe if I don't have fab filter, but it sounds like maybe when inserting fab filter in a mono channel, that it's the volume is decreased. So I don't have a license of fab filter, but maybe there's a gain adjustment in the plugin. So I'll just kind of show, and I could be just totally wrong in my misunderstanding because I'm quintessentially the ignorant American who doesn't speak other languages well. But it could be like when we go to, let's say, our frequency EQ, that if you're doing that, you can have an overall gain adjustment here within the EQ itself. So make sure that there's no gain. But if I misunderstood or if someone else could help translate, I'd appreciate it. All right, we see that Michael Pierce is dropping in and out, and he's getting his hair dyed again. So he's getting it all ready for the Zoom meetup on Tuesday. So thanks for joining us, Michael. All right, and we see that Jazz Dude who's able to provide a link for the Wavelab Elements 1103. All right, so we have Roland Klein checking in from Kalmar, Sweden, and Brian Sawyer from North Carolina, Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, so we see from Mopman, hi Greg, how do we use audio slices as samples? All right, so let's say I have drum loop here. So let's say, we listen to, and I'm going to drag this, we could do it in Groove Agent or in the sampler track. So now if I wanted to play the sample, but if we just come over here and slice, and we will now just we're going to slice, let's say, at transients. So now what we could do is, if I only wanted one particular sound, so we could just simply do that. And it's also like really handy. Sometimes people who improvise vocals, may have like all these great kind of just improv ideas, and maybe you're like, oh, I like what you did, that phrase there, that was really good, and this was terrible, that was cool, so if you wanted to often take a creative use of this, I'll just revert this project here very quickly. So let's say I wanted to see, I think I may have quick. Okay, so let's say, I have just like a...
No time to hesitate. No time to hesitate. It's all been done.
So if I come over here and let's say I just went through and added different slices, I could...
Let's go and baby. Get enough.
You could just trigger kind of different parts of the sample.
You wanna
So you could just kind of take what was a long improvised recording and do vocal chops and come up with different ideas, or kind of rearrange drum samples, like a drum loop, to kind of flip it and come up with different variations. So if we wanted to do for like a drum loop, I could just drag, let's say I'll just open this up and I'll drag this pattern over. So now that we've listened to our loop, I'll just make this a little louder. So now if I wanted to slice, I could just drag this to a event here, and let's say I'll just make copies. So as we listen to it, so now it could take kind of different slices, and if I wanted to just edit these particular slices, I could just say, okay, let's just take this and kind of do different reconstructions. So let's say, so if I wanted to take kind of the same groove as the original, I can just kind of come here. We say, let's do our original slices. And now I could just have, so at that point you could just kind of, flip notes around and kind of change the drum beat. So it's kind of two different ways of using slices. All right, so we have a question. I have a large orchestral template with small MIDI regions at the start for setup. Could you show how to set up a track visibility configuration shortcut that would show tracks with data only after measure 4? Okay. So I don't think that there's an option specifically for that. So you probably have where it's going to be you want this MIDI CC at this value initially. So I don't think that there's a way. Let's see if we could maybe do it in the Project Logical Editor. Okay, so let me remove. So let's say we want to select tracks. So say container type to track. Hang on just 1 second. Let me just. Okay, so we want to say select tracks. All right, so maybe we'll just take a different approach on this. So say we'll select Midi. And let's add position is let's say beyond let's say bigger than I don't think let's see if this could so we could set it up if you have cycle like loops on it. All right, so let me just say we'll add some MIDI tracks here. Let's say instrument tracks. Okay, let me just see if we could. We'll try transform and see if we could. So I don't know a way to set up the conditions for that. But one thing I'll share that may kind of mitigate the situation that a lot of people don't know. So I'm not sure if, if it's for kind of setting a static value for like, we want this to be, expression 77, 82, 91, 400, or, or 100 rather. And you want it, if you're using this to kind of hold like CC data for starting, one of the things that you could do is if you go to the MIDI inserts, you'll see a MIDI control. And then if we go to the MIDI control, we could say that, okay, we want modulation here to be 100, and we need our volume to be set to 127, and I want my expression to be set for this particular instrument to 88. So now every time we play, without having to have a little track, a little container event for this MIDI CC data, every time that you start the event, these MIDI CCs can automatically be sent to the particular track. So if these are just kind of holders for static starting off points for MIDI CC data, maybe consider using the MIDI insert plugin here to just simply hold that, and then you don't have to have kind of empty container parts. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of play around to see if there's a macro logical editor condition, project logical editor that I could use and create. All right, so we see Benny just says, now I have my new extender for my Icon Pro G2. Works violently well and easy to work with. That's great. Thanks for, I know you've been doing that for a while. And he has a new Stream Deck as well. So congratulations on the additions to your studio. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, it's Mary's Day in Ukraine. So as they celebrate today's soup, his soup suggestion will be borscht. So. All right, so you see, I have a question. Sometimes I have duplicate layers of MIDI. I have to manually delete every MIDI note to find the duplicates. Is there an easier way? So sometimes the MIDI notes, there is a delete doubles function. So if you go to MIDI and go to functions, I'll just... So let's say now, so we get a MIDI to functions, there is a delete doubles. But many times what happens is that we will have all of these notes here, but that would actually do a true double. So many times what happens when people get like double notes of everything is their MIDI controller is transmitting multiple channels. And Cubase is recording the same note being transmitted on MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2. So if that's the case, let me just come over. All right, so I'm going to put this to MIDI channel 2. I'll just kind of create this scenario. All right. So now let's say all of these are on MIDI channel 2. Okay, and I drag these two events on top of each other, and I grab my glue gun, and I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key and merge them together. So now when we go to edit, we'll see that I move one note. There's another note kind of hiding underneath it. So these aren't truly doubles because they're different MIDI values. Now, the easiest way to do this, if you run into this, is one, to set up your controller. If this is a scenario, it's probably your controller that's transmitting multiple channels. So if you're in a multi-patch on like a Yamaha Montage that's transmitting 8 MIDI channels to get a really thick sound, you're actually transmitting 8 MIDI channels, MIDI notes for every note that you play. So what you could do is, and you can see this pretty easily if you go into the MIDI list editor. So when we go to the list editor here, we can see that we'll have notes that will be, and I'll just kind of extend this over. So we see notes that are on MIDI channels 1 and 2. So we see that, these will be duplicated. So what we could do is you can come over here and you'll see kind of filter section. This may not be activated by default. So once we have filters, I could select, say, okay, I only want MIDI channel 1. So I'm going to select an event on MIDI channel 2. We'll go to focus and I'll say we want to focus on event channels. So we see all of these kind of just laid out for us. So we see all the notes that are on MIDI 2. And now I could just hit Control or Command plus the letter A, select all, and delete. And now when we go back to no focus, we'll only have MIDI channel 1 activated. Now, if they were both on MIDI channel 1, you could do the delete doubles. But if they're different values for the channels, at that point, that's when you would probably need to isolate it by channels using the list editor. So let me know if that helps, or if that's kind of going in the right direction. All right, so we have Ruzaman Azad saying hi. So welcome to the live stream. All right, so so we see Benny's had 50 gigs over the summer. It's now time to sit in the studio over the winter. So that's great. You got so many gigs. All right, so we have a question. Can you explain soft quantize and its rules? Thank you. All right, so let me. Okay, so let's say I have a bunch of MIDI notes here. Okay, so I put these in as, I'll just do it as 30-second notes to make it more apparent here. Okay, so what we have is a concept is soft quantizing. In Cubase terminology, we call this iterative quantization. So it's an English word I learned from Cubase. But we'll come over here to go to our quantize panel. All right, so let's say we want to quantize to quarter notes here. So we have a bunch of 30-second notes here in our drums. Okay, and we will go ahead and I'm going to turn off iterative quantize. So we'll just say quantize. And we'll see now everything is quantized perfectly to quarter notes. All right, and I'm just going to put in even some more notes here. Okay, so now, we quantize, everything is now going to be quantized straight. All right, so we'll just select all these and let's quantize them to quarter notes. So we do this and now everything is quantized perfectly to quarter notes. So we'll undo that quantize. And now let's come over here and we'll put it into our mode. And let's say we want it to be 70%. And this is, so now when we quantize, we could have notes that will fall within 70% of the beat. So if we were to kind of look at it visually here, and we wanted this particular note, so let's say we have this note selected. All right, so we can see in this note here, this note main, when it's within 70% of the beat, what it's going to do is it's not going to affect it's not going to quantize the particular notes directly to the beat. Let me just take off my snap. So it may quantize the notes within 70% closer to the beat. So if we played something in, and I'll just maybe just play something so we can, I'll just do it kind of roughly just to demonstrate this a little easier. Okay. So we'll just go, I'll solo this. Okay, so let's say I'll just do it without the. Okay, so we have just re-record quickly. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, so we have our phrase. So now when we look at it, we can say, okay, we look at it in the microscopic perspective where this note is a little early, this note's a little late. So we'll go to our quantize setting again. So we'll go to our quantize panel. And I'll say, let's make this, and we'll set it to maybe 90%. So I'm going to say, let's do eighth notes. So we look at this note here. This is ahead of the beat. So I'll quantize. And we can see that maybe not every single note is going to be so heavily quantized. So if we look at it, we can still see that this note is slightly ahead of the beat. So we say this is where beat 2 is. This note, now if I quantize it again, it just kind of moves 90% closer to the beat where we were. So we zoom in, we can see that the note doesn't actually get to the beat, but it moves 90% towards the beat to kind of give it more of a human feel. So I quantize again at 90%, and we can see that it's just kind of dividing the beat more and more as we do that. So it just keeps continuously moving it closer to the beat without being so absolute and strict. So that's kind of what the soft quantize does, and you could just simply come right over here and set the percentage. So that way, as you do it, it's not so mechanical sounding and a little more human. So that's why it's often called soft quantize or iterative quantization. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, reading through comments here. My chat field just jumped. All right, so I just see a comment from Best Green Jesus, Stream Deck versus BeatStep, 15 buttons, Elgato versus 16 pads plus 16 endless encoders. BeatStep costs less too. But one of the things, if you haven't worked with the Stream Deck, I'm not sure if the BeatStep does this, but each pad could go into nested folders. So you could have like a quantize folder and then, have 16 functions within there. And within those 16 functions have folders within folders within folders. So that makes it pretty cool. So I'm not sure if BeatStep does that or not. All right. All right, so we see a question. How would you set up a MIDI foot switch to trigger the talkback in Cubase 12? Okay, so we could do this through generic remote or MIDI remote. So if you have Cubase 12, so I'm going to just, we can make a MIDI remote device for it. You could also go into your studio setup. And if you want it to, at this point, just say, have a generic remote. So we can say, okay, this is going to be on, I'm just going to add a new generic remote. Okay, so I wanted to take, and I don't have a foot switch on right now, so let's just say I have. If I had a foot switch, it'd be connected here. So I'm just going to click on Learn. Sorry about that. All right. All right. So at this point, we will just click on Learn, and then you could move the particular MIDI button or message. So let's say, okay, I'm just going to hit a button on my controller keyboard, and it's going to learn that particular value. And then I think if we go to command to control room, you can see talkback on and off. So now as I hit this particular button in the control room, my talk, so you can just come right over here, set the MIDI in or out points. And then you could just say, okay, command, control room, talkback on and off. So every time you hit the foot switch, it would turn it on. So you could do it in a generic remote like that. Or if you wanted to just take, if you're doing it within a, you could just say, okay, I have a generic remote, like a MIDI remote script. So once you have an object set up, at this point, we could just go to key commands and you could search for talkback on and off under control room. So now you could just double click here. So as I would hit a button on my controller or whatever is defined, that could enable talkback as well. So you could do it in a new MIDI remote, or you could do it directly in the generic remote as well. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you learned something new, make sure that you have you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And once again, just a quick reminder, on Tuesday will be the last live stream of the month, so we'll have a Zoom meetup. So it's always a wonderful way to meet different people who are on the live streams and kind of in person, and we could have other people talk beside me. All right, so we see Mike Rivera checking in from San Antonio. Glad you can make it today. All right, we see Cedric back. All right, wonderful to see Cedric. Glad you could make it. And we see that he's sad. He heard of Joey DeFrancisco passing. So, yeah, it was kind of sad to read. Such a wonderful player. All right, and we see Madge Deepers from the UK on. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the live stream. Okay, so I see maybe a further clarification. Says, I meant removing the range between the left and right locators when circle is active. So let me go ahead and I'll show you how to do that. So let's say we have a track active here. So let's say I have my range selected. So if you want to do this, go to Edit, to Range, and then you could just say cut time. So if I wanted to do that for a number of different tracks, so I'll just say, okay, I wanted to get rid of this, and okay, kind of remove everything with a key command. So if you wanted to, so with this particular range, so if you wanted to just get rid of everything there, you go to Edit, to Range, and we could just say delete. So we could do delete time, or there's different range functions here. So, and again, we'll go to Range, and we could just say, so sorry, did the same thing twice. So if you wanted to insert silence or just simply cut or delete time, just use the range functions. So give that a try. All right, so thanks for all the great questions. All right. All right, so we have a question. I'm using Cubase for writing many sketches for different pieces in the same project. Is there a function besides markers I could use to organize and divide the material flexibly? So, what I kind of do a lot of times, sometimes people will, if we have items put into folders, so let's say if I have this folder set up, so let's say I'll copy it over here, and I'll make a copy. Here, I'll just set it up kind of like this. All right, so, many times I may have different folders that might like when I have sketches in a particular song. So, you could navigate to folder tracks, and this way you could have a lot of different aspects directly inside of a folder track. So you could have different sketches here, and and then if you wanted to open the selected folder, you could see a sketch here, you could see a sketch here of different instruments. And if you wanted to kind of navigate, some people could also just come over and create different track versions if you wanted to. But I think markers and maybe utilizing folder tracks is a good technique. So this way you're not navigating with 300 tracks visible or 40 tracks visible on each one, that you could just kind of expose the folder you want to see and kind of tuck all the other elements and events away. All right, I just see, and kind of a further addition to the question, and being able to add a different section after the fact. When new ideas come, I kind of have to just use markers and look for correlating section and insert bars, and it all becomes messy. So one of the things, like if we have different tempos, so let's say we have a tempo track here. Okay, so let's say I have different tempos for each of the sections. So I'll just activate my tempo track. Okay. So if we, and at this point, if we are working with different points, if we hold down, like with the range tool, and let's say if I have this without my divide track list. So let's say I have my tempo track at the top here. And sometimes where it gets messy is if you grab kind of the, range here. So if we do a global copy, so, here we could just do a global copy, and that would include kind of like all the different elements. But let's say, so if I wanted to paste that with my tempo, I could just come right over here, and that would paste the folder with all the tempo. Or if we wanted to just say, okay, right from here, I wanted to insert time, we could go to the range tool, and we could just say, okay, I want to insert silence, and that would knock everything over by the specified range, and also kind of keep all the tempo data in check with the existing parts, so you don't lose that relationship. All right, so we have Jeff Sabelski just mentioning he has Groove Agent 5, which is a bit better than the 2 drum drop LPs he has from 1978. All right, so we have a question. If any effects in Cubase Pro, like stape effects in Logic Pro. So I don't know what stape effects are, but maybe if you could describe. So maybe it's kind of like the FX modulator. So I see. But if you wanted to check out like the FX modulator, you could do all sorts of great stuff with that. Just get this project open real quick. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just have kind of like, and I want to take this pad, we can come over to our inserts and we could add like different modulations. So say if I wanted to do like volume changes, or you could kind of make your own. You could have the program automatically kind of generate random curves as well. Or if you wanted to use kind of known curves. So let's just say, sorry. So I would say, okay, let's make this like 16th notes. And maybe I wanted to smooth this a little bit. And maybe I wanted to only be in particular frequency ranges. So I don't want it to really low end. And let's say I want to do a different module, and I have up to 6 modules here. So let's say, okay, let's just do, and let's do this over 2 measures. And so you could just kind of bring in different filters or frequency shifters, compressors. So if I wanted to go to my flanger, so all sorts of things that you could do. So if that's a type of effect that you're going for, and even if you wanted to now. So this one. So just kind of taking this particular track here. And doing those types of modulation effects. So if that's what that plugin is, the Stape Effects. But if it's something different, just let me know. All right, so we have Dash just came in. He's a beginner at Cubase and wants to explore more. Is interested in following closely. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. And if anytime you have questions, just feel free to chime in and ask in the comments field. All right, so you see Uno Memento has been on Cubase Steinberg software for 40 years, and you had an Atari Mega 2 ST, Atari Mega ST2, 2 megabytes of RAM. So I had a Mega 4, so dare to dream 4 megabytes of RAM. What could you do? Good times. I still have my Mega 4 ST, so. All right, we see some diligent moderation by Jazz Dude. Thank you for that. All right, so we see when are you guys going to fix bugs which cause the freezing on opening and exiting of Cubase? So many of the times they're actually caused by third-party plugins that don't release memory. So sometimes it's out of our control as to if plugins don't release memory. So I don't have any freezing on opening or playing on, the computer I'm using for the live streams is, almost exclusively on the Steinberg products, Steinberg plugins, and I don't have any problems with that on my my personal studio computer. I probably have 400 or 500 plugins, and I don't have any issues. So many of the times it's going to be just a plugin that doesn't actually release from memory. So some of it's out of our control. So you might be able to isolate it to third-party plugins. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way, just find it, to make all tracks the same height? So if we just hold down the Control or Command key and adjust one track, they will all adjust to the same height, just like that. So Control or Command and drag the bottom down, and then you could resize kind of all of the tracks. Or if you have different tracks that are selected, you could just, if they're selected, we could just resize the selected ones. But if you don't want it based upon selected tracks, just hold down the Command key, grab the bottom of one, and drag it up or down, like so. So we see from Madge Deepers that she had a few instances of Cubase crashing with checking licenses or scanning VSTs during load up process. So sometimes if the program, if the plugin isn't licensed and it sees it, it could cause issues. So again, some of that's kind of out of our control as we're doing kind of tests with, and as they're, loading up systems. All right, sorry, my chat field. All right, so you just see I have a question dealing with classical music. Is there a way to divide a single project into multiple movements other than markers for easy back and forth switching between movements? All right, so let me just open up a quick project here. Let's see if it's in my recent. All right, so say. All right, so what many classical composers that I know will. So let's say we have kind of, so it's very common for people who are doing kind of more classical composition to just come over here. So let's say we have a multi-movement piece just directly in the events. Now, if you wanted to do this without utilizing markers, so let's say let's just duplicate this. Okay, so if you didn't want to utilize markers, one of the things that you could do for a classical thing, and this has many uses, but if we add an arrangement track, so we can add an arranger track, so we could just say this is going to be and then each of these, if we just hold down kind of, we can say Allegro. And we'll just call this, Adagio. And we'll call this, Finale. And if you want to put whatever movement name. So now if you wanted to navigate between the different movements, you can come right over here. Let me just remove this, but you could just navigate to, so if you wanted to just navigate to different sections, you could just do this, just kind of do this directly, using. So these are our 4 different parts. So I'll just add these. So if I wanted to just jump to the finale or jump to here, so you could use the arranger track. And if you wanted to, even have subsections of the arranger track, like, okay, maybe I wanted to, when to bring in the recapitulation here, we could just choose to add different parts. So we say, okay, this is where we go down to, theme in minor or the B section. So we could just come over here, and then you could just rearrange our different sections within a piece and have all of the parts just carry over so that you don't have to copy a zillion pieces. So, experiment with the arranger track if you don't want to use markers. And then you have a lot more flexibility with the arrangements and keep it all in one project so everything could be loaded up for you. So that's how I would do it as for a classical piece. All right, so Michael Teams wants everyone to punch the like button, and so I could be gainfully employed. So I'd appreciate that. I like having a job. All right, and we have Fender Shander from Vienna checking in. Thanks for being here. And all right, so we have a question. What is the difference between a group track and an effects track? Is it just choosing the options in the start when creating, or is there also some other difference? So it used to be that day where there was like a subtle difference, like I think group tracks, they basically, in essence, will do the same thing, but we could add, if we have an effects track, let's jump back to a different project here. So all right, so if you add an effects track and then add plugins into it, it's it could be a 2-step process, and it could be very similar. But you could also just, like, if I wanted to, quickly with an effects channel track, select these and let's add an effects channel track and say, okay, I want this reverb. So I just want to add a reverence reverb. So now I could have all of those tracks automatically assigned to it and have the reverb loaded up without having to manually add the reverb. But, essentially they're kind of doing, almost identical things. And one thing that used to be that, that we could have panning individually, like on individual tracks. I think this was a distinction that was taken away. So if I wanted to take my snare and take that to, let's say, my send, that we could adjust the panning differently, but I think that distinction was taken away in like version 8-ish or so. But really, in essence, they're very similar. But with an effects channel track, you're just automatically asked and prompted to load an effects channel, and it'll create all the routing for you. Whereas a group track is, for summing, but you don't necessarily have to use effects on it. So, but 99% similar. All right, so we see question, can I drag a MIDI event to the chord track in Cubase 12 and have it make the chord symbols? Is it correct that you cannot drag it in Cubase 11, but you have to do it via the menu? So I think that was one of the changes in Cubase 12. They added a new function to carry over from the audio. So that was an addition in Cubase 12. So I could take a piano part here and drag it to the chord track. But in either version, we would have to come over. In version 11, we would have to go to the chord track and choose Create Chord Events, and that would automatically add it. But now you could do it for either audio or MIDI by dragging in version 12. All right, reading through comments. All right, wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Big Tent in Nashville. Thanks for joining us. And we have David M. checking in from Liverpool. All right, so we have a question from Harry Hem. MIDI editor, how to fix several selected notes to a fixed velocity at once. Okay. Okay, so let's say I will. Okay, so we have varied velocity here. So I think if I come to the velocity and hold down Shift, so let's do 100. And so I'll take those selected notes. So just all you have to do is select the notes, and you'll see from the velocity line here in the info line, hold down Shift, type in the velocity value you want, and those notes will immediately jump to that fixed velocity value. So it looks like they're varied some. So you could just, okay, so let's do these two fixed value. So let me try a different modifier key. So I can hold down Control. That's not it. Try holding control. Yeah, so hold down command or control, and then the selected notes from the info line will all be set to the same value. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted David, Reuter, and Kristen 1 gallon of Black Forest cake ice cream. So, sounds like a good choice. Okay, so we see a question. Could you please demonstrate and talk about the follow that appears on top when you select a clip? Just looking for it here. Let me see if I select. Okay, so there's a global transpose. All right, so let's say I had MIDI drums going on. So let's say I'll just do a horrible drum beat. I'll just throw something in. All right, so I'll do just something horribly inappropriate, but just for demonstration purposes, let's say. Okay, so when we see follow indicated here, if that's what under global transpose, so let's say I'm listening to all right, so let's say my drums aren't necessarily tied to, harmonic notes, so we have individual notes that are just triggering different sounds. But if we have something that's more harmonic based, more musical based here, like the piano, and if I have a transpose track, so let's say we add a transpose track. Okay, so I'm going to come, and as we just drop in some transpositions. I probably don't want the drums to actually change. So I'm going to come here and say, let's go up 5. So I may want the drums playing back the same notes that are triggering samples as opposed to following the transposition that I've applied here. So I want the drums to kind of still play the same pattern. So here what I would do is choose all of these events not to be independent. So I could transpose the piano. So I'm going to just, when I transpose, the piano transposes, but the MIDI drums, which would change all of the MIDI drum sounds, won't transpose. So again, if I have all these selected, and this is set to transpose, but I set to independent, it's going to play the same kind of drum pattern. So that's what the follow is. But if it's a different follow, that you see indicated here. I think this is what you're talking about. If it's a different follow, please let me know. I see from Rickshaw I guess this is a point that Best Korean Jesus has made. It says, are you saying Cubase 11 and 12 are exactly the same in this regard? I'm trying to understand if there's a difference. I'm on Cubase 11. So yeah, Cubase 11 doesn't have the drag and drop to the MIDI, to the chord track from MIDI, and Cubase 12 does. Okay, see John Costigan just saying, Greg, multiple folder tracks for sketches, Revelation #1 for today. Wow. So I'm glad it's helpful. And Michael Team says, wow, is right. So you never have to make a commitment. You know, it's probably why Cubase is popular with men. All right. All right. Okay, so I just see from Rob Boddick. Thanks for being on the live stream. It says, hello, MIDI synchro with audio files. So if you had, you know, let's say let's do a new project here. So if you wanted to apply the feel of an audio event to MIDI, so let's say I'm just going to drag over a quick drum loop. All right, just going to check my connections real quick. Bear with me. Oh, had this down from. All right, so say I have said drum loop. All right, so I wanted to come over here and do a quick bass part. So let's say. All right, so I'll just play some horrible MIDI bass parts here quickly. All right, so let's say. All right, sorry, let me just. Okay, so. Okay, so let's say. All right, so let's say I just had a quick, let's say I'll just start this at the very beginning just to show this. So if we wanted to have kind of the same vibe, let's give myself a quick count in. Okay, so all right, so if I wanted to basically just kind of take this particular vibe, so I'm going to, let's say we had our audio, and I'm just going to quickly, we'll just make this into one part. I don't necessarily have to do that, but I'll just say we'll bounce selection and replace events. So once I come over to our sample editor, we'll go to hit points. And we could just say, okay, we're going to edit our hit points of the drum loop. Okay, so we'll adjust our threshold so we can catch like a lot of the subtle things. And then we could actually click on create groove. And now when I do that, let's open up my Midi part. And I can now just choose to quantize. So we'll see our quantize preset here from that particular groove. So I will, just come right over here and quantize the events. So that way what you could do is once you have the audio feel, you could just simply double click to launch the sample editor, go into the hit points, create a groove, and that shows up as your quantize preset. So, but if I misunderstood, let me know. All right, so we have Soren. Greg, what could be done to question, what could be done to get stereo width to a perfect mono source, a straight narrow line in supervision, phase, panorama, like retrolog, init patch? Should I not care much about it? So a lot of times if we just, let's say we come over here and we'll add, let's say retrolog, let's say just kind of the initial oscillator here. Just by the nature, its sound is probably so mono. So let me just, that as we do this, that, it creating, when we look at kind of the panning spectrum of it. So we'll come over to the control room and let's open up. So that as we look in that, just kind of the nature of the sound would, kind of preclude it from having a lot of phase. But as we would add different components in the instrument itself, so let's say, okay, I want to add a second oscillator. And let's change the oscillator type, so we could just simply, like as we would adjust kind of our different components. So say, okay, let's just, You know, like, so as we would add different components to it, we could change the sound. So let's say, you know, as we would look at a, you know, and as we have more complex harmonic activity, that you'll see that kind of reflected in the like panorama scope here. But I wouldn't say it's anything to worry about. Sometimes you need something to sit just straight in the middle, or, you know, straight in a very specific area. But, and then, you know, depending on the patch, it's totally fine if it's going to be just set, like for the initial panning, just to be set, you know, where you see it reflected just in stereo. So. All right, so we see Match Deepers has to check out. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question about the FX modulator. What's the difference between stage 1, 2, and 3 in the multi-mod effect? So let's go take a look. Don't know off the top of my head, but let's see if we could figure it out. All right, let me just try with maybe a different source. Hang on, just. Okay, so come over here. So I think it's just going to give you different so we still have stage 1 and stage 2, stage 3. So I think it's just going to allow you to have multiple. So I think it's, and I could read up on this, I could be mistaken, but I think basically it's going to allow you to have 3 different like multi-modulation stages, so that can kind of work in parallel with each other. So I think that's kind of what it's for. So, but I could do some reading up on it if you want to send me an email. All right, so I just see P-stay effects, reverb in drums. So I'm not sure if you wanted me to add reverb in drums. If that's the case, so sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but we'll show you how to do this. So let's say if we have like a number of drum tracks that we wanted to add like a reverb bus to. So let's say I'll take these tracks here. So let me go ahead and I'll just revert this to start from scratch. So we added a reverb to it already just a little while ago. All right, so let's say we want to take our drums. So to add reverb to all my drums, I could select all the tracks, right click, and we'll add an effects channel track to this selected channel. So, and then you could take, if we come over here, we could adjust the level of each of the sources. So we could blend more reverb or less reverb in, but if I'm misunderstanding the question, just let me know. Sorry about that. All right, so we see a question. Can you go over track lanes and comping a vocal? So I'll show you with kind of a bass part, but the same principles will apply. So let's see if I have. All right, so if we have multi-take recording, excuse me, and we have recorded like maybe different takes. So we could open up the lanes and we could see all of the lanes here. So we could grab the little comping tool. So now if I wanted to just click on a different take, so if I wanted to do a comp between these different performances, once I have the comp tool selected, I could just select different sections and that would automatically allow us to, and if we wanted to hold down Control or Command, we could audition different ones. And now we could just say, okay, this is my comp. So as we do this, and if we wanted to just kind of come over here and just change the boundaries, we could do that quite easily, just like this, all without kind of switching tools. So that's how some of the comping works. And then once you're done, we can see all the parts reflected in kind of the master recording right there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see question, is there a log system files that I could check to know what plugin crashed the system to log out? So sometimes you get that information for when a plugin causes a crash. Sometimes you don't, depending on the nature of the crash. But if you go to preferences, I think it's under general, you could just simply come over here and enable usage logging. And that would give information that you could send to Steinberg, where they could help trace particular plugins. Some plugins will, the nature of how they crash will, just simply give the information. It'll be obvious, and sometimes it crashes before that information can be collected. So that's why the usage login, so you can see exactly what you did before each step. And you could pass that along and pass it on to Steinberg with that. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Welcome, saying good evening to all the Cubase City Rollers. All right. Glad you could make it today. All right, and we also have Sable Winters, and she's like number 75. All right, so just see, I see this from Fender Shander. I just want to know if they have the same mix priority. So I don't remember exactly, I can't recall exactly what the question was that you'd asked earlier. So sorry about that, but all right, so we see, hi Greg, is there a way to listen to the Media Bay loops and presets without having to go through the control room? Thanks. Well, sometimes, what happens is, let's see, I'll try it again. Sometimes we'll just deactivate my control room. So let's say, let's deactivate control room. And then let's go to the outputs. And I'm going to right click and we'll set this as the main mix. So try that, David, if you wanted to. So if you're anti-control room, you could give that a try. So that seemed to work. But sometimes conceptually, what can happen is, the track, the audio that you're previewing doesn't have a home yet. So it doesn't have a track. So if you have like multiple outputs going to a console, then, it may not, output to the correct track that you want. And that's hence why you have the media bay. But just try, if you turn it off and just right click on your output to the main mix, it seems to work. All right, so we see, is that linked to one effect or is that distinct iterations after assigning the reverb? So I think that this is like when I was taking a look. So if we come here and we want to add an effects channel to all this, when we add an effects channel and all these are routed, I'll activate the project so we could see it. So when we go to add track effects channel to selected tracks, this way it's going to be one effect that all the tracks are being, that we could send all the tracks to via an effect send. So that way it's one single track, one single effect. So, it's kind of silly to run the same 8 reverbs on drums when you could just do it with one. So let me know if sometimes by the time I get to the comment on something I showed, it's hard for me to know in context what it's referring to. So if you see something cool, just kind of try to if you make a reference to what the initial point was, because it could be like 20 minutes or so. All right, so we see... All right, so I see a question from Ronaldo 300. Bro, can you rewire Cubase 12 to Reason 10? So basically, Reason Studios now, or Propeller Heads, they dropped, Rewire, so it's not going to be working on, upcoming operating systems, current operating systems, current processors. So they dropped they drop support for it, so we drop support for it as well. But if you're running the latest version, I'm not sure. I don't have a Reason license, but the latest versions do run as VST plugins, which is probably a much better way to use it, because then you could save your actual project with all the settings. So that way you save one project instead of saving a Reason rack project and a Cubase project and have them both open. But that's why, Propeller Heads or Reason Studios, they have decided not to continue to develop or to work on and do maintenance on Rewire. So if you're upset about it, you could reach out to them. All right. So we see Greg, Cubase question from Soren. Cubase 12 Elements quit having the logical editor presets. Apparently, in the randomized velocity between 60 to 80 was useful to my friend. For hi-hats, also, is there a workaround for Elements? So let me see if... I don't think I have Cubase 12 Elements on installed on my new computer. I haven't installed that one, but you could. I think it would still kind of maybe it's different. I know in Cubase 12 some of the logical editor presets, so they may just show up when we go to logical. So let's say if I have a MIDI event here. That the logical editor, when you open it up, may not see the presets. I would think that it would have presets because it's something, but also make sure that as we work on it, that when you go to MIDI and you go to the logical editor, and this is different, that there is apply preset, and then maybe you should see the presets. But if you want to email me, I could see if I get a Elements 12 license, and I can install that and see if there's, I could confirm that for you. All right, so we have a question from Drano Corleone. Is there a way to use the pencil in a random velocity input method? Would be really helpful for programming drums? Okay, so there is, let's say if I come... All right, so there is like an input velocity. So let's say when I come over and I put drums in, it may just automatically put in 100. So let me just... Okay, so we'll see that these are all kind of the same velocity as we put it in. So there's not a random one, but let me see if I may have to turn this on. Okay, so there is this insert velocity. All right, so we see as we come here. So we could, as we input a note, it's going to put it in at 100, but if we just wanted to put it in at 70 instead, or if you wanted to put it in at 50, and you could just, you could actually set this up, and you could have presets for these different levels, and there are key commands, I believe, that we could just switch. So if we go to, I think it's under MIDI, then you'll see insert velocity 1 through 5. So we have presets for this so that you could just hit a key command or a button on your controller and switch between the different velocities. So it's not random, but you could have 5 different levels. You could set those levels to be exactly what you want. If you wanted to match particular velocity ramping of snares or hi-hats or kick drums, whatever, you could just have that. So, and then you could save multiple presets for that. So give that a try. So you'll just see the insert velocity here, and then you could just put in different values directly there. So it's not random, but I think it'll get you where you want to very quickly. All right, so we have a question. How do I name sections in the arranger track? Okay, so let's say we have an arranger track. I'll add one into this project. Okay, so as we enter them in, it'll be like A, B, very creatively named and labeled. But all you have to do is hold down the Alt or Option key and double click, and then you could type the names. So Alt or Option, double click, type a name. So just like that. See Gareth's comment, you never have to make a commitment. That's why. And he's just saying that's why he uses Cubase to run his life. So that's good. All right, so I just see, how do I know that my Cubase Pro 12 is running natively on my Mac M1? So I think if you just go to About Cubase Pro, like when you actually start the program, or you go to the About Cubase Pro, like I'm running mine under Rosetta for a couple of plugins, you'll see it indicated right there. If it's, and you'll see, you know, so like now I'm running mine in Rosetta 2, so you could just see it, but go to the Cubase menu to About Cubase Pro, and you could see right there if it's running M1 native or not. And to change it, just go select the Cubase icon in your Finder and right click and choose Get Info, and then you could see if it's open in Rosetta or not right there. All right, so we have Heinz Kropf saying hi, hello to everyone. Thanks for being on. All right, so I just see a comment, and this may be with the kind of matching matching the quantize. So it's says, why don't you auto quantize as you go when trying to match quantize? So you could do that as well. So that's another way to do it, but sometimes you may change the loop or something like that afterward. So it depends if you already have the loop, or maybe you're trying to change an element and then you need to modify the feel based on a different element. All right, so we see what's the fastest way to raise a part in 1 dB using automation? Okay, so let's say I just want to take the selected event. So if we just want to take a little part here, you know, you could just kind of raise it directly here. So like as we go, so let's say I could see that we're at minus 15.9. I could type in minus 14.9. Let's see for that selection. Let's see if this works. Another way to do it is just to take in the project logical editor. So, I think that is a pretty easy way to take the selected range, and you could just kind of move it there. So it may not be exactly 1 dB, but you could also do the project logical editor. So if you have the automation selected, and I think there's even presets for this. So you could say decrease selected track by 1 dB inside the cycle if you want. So, we could do stuff like that, but I'll just start from scratch with Project Logical Editor. So we could say we want to transform automation Then we could say we want to trim increment by 1 dB. All right, so let's see if we'll do it on the selected. So that will do all of it. And let's say if we have the automation selected, like if I just want one particular range, so and you could just do selected range. So if I just wanted to come here and say, so if I have like 2 points here, we could say, okay, I want to take the selected automation points and let's say decrease them, decrement by 1 dB. So a number of different ways of being able to take the automation up or down by a dB. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to raise MIDI events volume like clip automation on audio events? So it's not because, they're kind of two different entities, but, if you wanted to, because this isn't, a volume necessarily, but if you, wanted to, if we had MIDI CC7, so let's say we had main volume control here. What we could do is, like, if you're in the event, just, take your MIDI CCs and be able to raise it accordingly within the particular event. You could also just raise, but since it's MIDI data, it's not necessarily, this MIDI part could be going out to another device that doesn't respond to MIDI CC7, or out to hardware or software that doesn't respond to it. So having the ability, if it's not always going to be a virtual instrument, it could be going out to external devices. So with MIDI data, it's going to be handled differently just because the two types of data are different in their inherent nature. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Machine, this is a great series. Thank you, at Cubase. You're welcome. So hope it's helpful for people. So, and I look forward to doing the live streams. I may not look forward to doing the indexes till 10 o'clock at night afterwards, but I think it's well worth doing it. Okay, so we see Spike Williams from Wales has got a scoot. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, is it possible to load multiple samples in the sampler track or not? So it's intended not to be just designed for a single sample, but if you want it multiple, if you wanted multiple samples, you could load it into something like, Groove Agent SE or Halion quite easily. So. Let's see, Gerald Ely is just saying, learned something today just by watching Greg use his mouse and his scroll wheel. So that's good. Lots of very powerful things you could do with that. Hey, Greg. So I see a question. Hey, Greg, are you a certified trainer or do you just know much? So actually, there is a certified trainer program at Steinberg, but I never applied for it. I've kind of been involved with the company professionally over 30 years, so I know a lot about the product. So I guess I should apply so I could put on my LinkedIn profile that I'm a Steinberg certified trainer. So, but I just answered a lot of questions for people for many years. So I probably answered more questions for, on just random stuff than other people have had the opportunity to. So, but yeah, I work as a, I work for Yamaha, Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the United States distributor for Steinberg products. So I'm kind of an honorary Steinberg employee. So. All right, so I just see, does he have tracks/songs somewhere? So, I'm not a composer, but you could check out like some of the, Michael Teams and Pablo, who's been on the live streams a lot, and Gareth. I played bass on some of a project. We did a project together, so I think I can't take credit for how it turned out, but I know Michael Teams and Pablo and Gareth, put a tremendous amount of effort, and they were kind enough to let me play bass on it. But if you check out Hot Mess, HOTTMESS, I played bass on that. I've also, done engineering stuff. I was an engineer on Eric Clapton's Crossroads project, which won a bunch of awards in 2004. And I used to work in studio stuff way back when, so I've helped a lot of artists. All right, so we see, wow, this lane thing is faster than Pro Tools. So, yeah, it's a pretty good paradigm for doing that. So we see, is there a similar series for VST Live? If you have VST Live questions, we're always willing to answer them. So it's a fairly new product, so not as many people are into it yet, but I think it's a wonderful tool that, Charlie Steinberg and his team have developed, and, does a lot of stuff, a lot of really interesting stuff in there. So if you have VST Live questions, you could send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or if you have a quick question, we could probably go through that as well. All right, Benny wants people to bang the like button. All right, so we see from Ken Coleman. His question is, if you had to buy a new laptop for Cubase, do you have any favorites? I just got a new M1 MacBook Pro with 64 gigs of RAM for work, and that's been working really well. I know a lot of my PC friends have kind of gotten into I think Acer and Asus laptops. Also, lots of people doing Dell and Alienware. I haven't tried out a lot of PC laptops. I have an old i7 laptop. It's probably 10 years old now, from Music XPC out of Canada. And that still runs great. It was just an i7 with like a terabyte SSD, and that's still a workhorse machine. So there's lots of, but maybe other people will kind of, have some input on laptops that they've worked with. See from David M. Well, that worked pretty easy. Thanks, Greg. Glad to hear it. All right, so you see a question. Sometimes when a plugin is open and I'm editing values, Cubase does not react on start-stop on a numeric keypad keystrokes, and sometimes it does. Any ideas of what's happening to it? So it may be that, like, as the plugin window is open and it's like an active value. So let's say if I just... All right, so let's see if I have this. All right, so what it did here is, let's say on this plugin, so I could see where some plugins may take control if it's like an actively selected field, like where you want to type in a value, that, it may just keep entering in a value. So it could be something like that the plugin is taking focus away from the key commands. And then when you do this, that it's not getting to, like, the numeric keypads aren't functioning. So I think it might be just a matter of focus for that. So if you're just sitting here and the zeros are going into the parameter field, and sometimes maybe a parameter box is enabled unintentionally, so check that, but I think that kind of makes sense for the behavior. All right, so we have a question. Sometimes when I add mono tracks to a group track, for instance, a drum group, I lose panning on those tracks. Is there a workaround when this happens? So usually when I hear this, it means that the group track that was added was a mono group as opposed to a stereo group. So let's say if I revert to this project, since I've destroyed it, my friend Fred wouldn't be happy with me. So let's say I have all of these tracks here, and I just want to take the drums, and let's say I have like my overheads panned well, and I'll just turn my overheads up and make it real obvious. All right, so let's say if I... So let's say if I add these to a group, and I wanted to make this a mono group in a configuration, that now when we come listen to our groups, that everything is very kind of mono sounding now. But if I wanted to take all those sources and route it to a stereo group, so we go to add, let's say, group channel, and I'll just add group channel to the selected channels and make sure that it's in stereo. So now as we do this, so say I'll just kill all solos, and so now when we do our drums and they're panned, that we hear them panned accordingly. So it's probably just being sent, Ken, to a mono group accidentally. So. All right, so we just see feature request, random velocity pencil tool. So yeah, I mean, there's enough ways I think to, you know, like as you enter to hit one button and randomize the velocities, if you wanted to. But I'll definitely kind of pass it along. But you know, sometimes I think, you know, entering in random velocities, you know, if it's going to be truly random, you know, do you want a hi-hat that's going to be, you know, 1, 13, you know, 107, 127, you know, 2, 63, you know. So I think random sometimes, you know, you may want to randomize stuff within particular parameters afterwards rather than just randomly entering in velocity. So, but I think if you get used to using the input velocities, that you can get very powerful with it and get exactly what you want. And then if you need to change it, you can. All right. So we see question. Is there a chance to create a key command to put spectral layers onto an audio track? The normal macro process does not work, or at least I don't find out how. So let's see if we could do that. I haven't tried. Okay, let's take a look at key commands. Yeah, I don't see a way of doing it with the key command, but I'll pass that along as a feature suggestion. Let me just look under ARA. Yeah, so yeah, I don't see a way of doing that, but I'll pass that along as a feature request. Sorry about the omission of that. All right, so we have a question. Is there any real advantage for Cubase 12 Pro running on Windows 11 against Windows 10? So I haven't worked so much with Windows. You know, I run Windows 10 on my studio machine. So I don't know if there's any particular advantages of Windows 11. Maybe someone else who, you know, I haven't upgraded mine. I try to keep kind of the same operating system as long as I can that came with the machine. You know, so like I didn't really notice like a super, for me, like for my Cubase use, I didn't notice a super like, oh, I have to get Windows 11 for this personally. So, but I see the Jazz dudes just piping in as well, or sharing some insights that, you know, Windows 10 is still better. So I don't think that there's any huge advantage to doing it. So if you don't have to, I don't think there's any consequences to doing it, or consequences against not doing it and staying in Windows 10. So. Okay, so we have a question. My control room insert slot 6 prefader is full. Can I use the 8 monitor slots? Right. What is bad about that, and which is ahead of which? So I think that the monitor is going to be so if we look at our effects in the control room, so we can see our inserts here. So I think it's going to be kind of going downward. It's kind of the, general concept. So I think that the monitors may come first before the control room insert. So I don't think there's any consequences with that. But so I think that you're okay. But if I had to guess, and I haven't tested it, that the monitor may go first, and and why there's the distinction is, like, let's say you needed to EQ a particular monitor speaker differently than another, or you had, you didn't have a way of shutting off like a kill switch volume wise for powered monitors, and you wanted to put a limiter on your powered monitors, but maybe you had a kill switch for volume on passive monitors going through a power amp, that you could have different inserts for each of the monitors paths, and then that coupled with the overall control room inserts. So all right, so we just see a comment from Harry Hem, says, this is one of the most interesting live streams with many real great questions to enhance my daily work with Cubase. And Greg does explain it so well. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's what I like about this format, is every live stream has its own kind of, life and its own like storyline. And, and I think that even if someone asks a question you didn't think of asking, that you could learn great tips and tricks. So I'm just glad to be able to help and answer questions for people. All right, so we see from Terry Gray, says, hey, I just got here. I'm starting to wrap my head around a control room. Any tutorials out there for in-depth learning? So I did a pretty, like maybe a 12 or 15 minute tutorial video on a control room. It might be like when it was first, maybe when we did the mixer change, the mixer redesign in Cubase 7. But I did do one. I could probably choose to redo it because there's been some additional functionality that's been added. But if you have particular questions, or if there's a concept you're kind of hung up on, Terry, just let us know, and we'll be glad to do that. And I'll put on my list of kind of tutorials to do. Okay, so we see from Volker Schmoll, if I play bass, guitar, voice, and interface, I'm never really satisfied. I trim bass drum, put snare at correct level. Also, what's going wrong? I feel like Amy. So, if you have a particular project you want to share, it's kind of hard to help with that. But you should be able to. It's always think of, getting as many, one just concept that I kind of figured out early on. It was kind of like an epiphany moment for me, is, thinking that, I would kind of look at a song or a mix or a production, an arrangement, kind of like a piano, where it's like, okay, you need the right amount of low notes and the right amount of mid-range notes, the right amount of high notes. You need the balance of those. And even if you are thinking of the kick drum, you need high frequencies on the kick drum to make it kind of sometimes cut through the mix, or you need some treble on a bass and mid-range to give it definition, even though you think, oh, it's just the bass. So having the proper balance of all of the frequency ranges for each of the instruments can help, I think, a lot in kind of getting things to sit well in the mix. You see Jazz Dudes posted a control room tutorial video. Okay, so we just see Halion having an issue at the time of audio mixdown? Is there any solution for finding two different tracks having same name? So much time taking the time of multiple exports. Okay, so if it's like you have a project, so let's just say I'll duplicate this track, right? And let's say I move it down here. So, one of the things you could do is if it's the tracks are having the same name, you could just, hit Control F and there's this little search function. So if you just type in like KIK, at this point you could see all the tracks that have KIK in the name, or every track that has bass in the name. So as we come over here, you can just type in bass and then hit enter and it'll select that particular track. So that is a way to see exactly where the tracks are. If it's relating more to the export audio mixdown, where sometimes you may get a message that you need a unique file name, over here you could just on conflicts, you could just say, instead of always ask, maybe just have it default to create unique file names. And if you wanted to search for channels here, so let's say I have, just type in KIK here, and then you could find all the tracks that may have the same name here. So that may be an easy way to kind of search for the particular tracks. And if you needed to, say, okay, I don't want that track. So maybe just searching the name in the export audio dialog, maybe that would help. Or if you do it on a track level, clicking on the little magnifying glass here, like you want to look, you could just do that right there. So just see from Volker Schmoll, just saying you have 3 weeks to build an album. What are the rules? Just get it done in 3 weeks, Yeah, and you see Jeff Sabelski just mentioning, I once asked, just comment, and I wish we got it in the Hans Zimmer Spotlight interview because it was such a great reaction. We asked him, I just asked, was like, how do you know when you're done with the score? And he's like, it's when a director comes and knocks on the door and says, give me the music, otherwise it'll just kind of keep going forever and ever. So all right, just reading through comments. Great. All right, so I think I'm at the comments field. I know we had some questions that were mailed in, so let me just make sure I'm at the end here. So I think I'm at the end of the live chat questions for now. So let me go through some of the other questions that were mailed in. Bear with me just for a moment while I open up. All right, so we see Uno Mementos checking out. He wants everyone to have a nice weekend, and he'll see us on Tuesday. And he has a beer stein. Okay, so the first question we had is how to do step input for a drum beat. All right. So let's do new project. All right, so let's say if I'm just going to do this in the drum editor, but we could do this also in the, sorry about that. We could also do this in the key editor in kind of the same way. So just create a quick drum map from the instrument. All right, and I'm going to just create an empty part. All right, so we have, okay, so in the drum editor, what we want to do is I'm just going to check because I think I hit the transpose button on my keys inadvertently. So let me just transpose correctly here to make it a little faster. Meant to do this before. Okay. All right. So let's say we want to do step entry. So first thing is you may see that you may have to go to the setup and add step entry. All right. So we have step MIDI input here. So as we come over here, you'll see like a little staircase. And you may have to move it up depending on your screen resolution. So I will come over. All right, so you'll see this little, almost looks like a stair step. So let's say, okay, I just wanted to put this on. And we'll see this little blue line. And let's say, okay, I just want to put in half notes here. So I'll just say, okay, so now that we've done that, so we see that we're going to have so we'll see our kicks inputted. So let's say, okay, I want to put in hi-hats, but I want to go back to the beginning. You know, now to move to the beginning, you just simply, all you have to do is just kind of click, and we'll see kind of where the blue line is. So let's say I just wanted to put in hi-hats, but I want the hi-hats to be, and this will be, let's say 30-second notes. So as I just hit the particular notes, and then I can hit the right arrow key to put space. And let's say, okay, now I want to put snare in, so I could just move. All right, so let's say I'll just come here. Let's put this on half notes. So now I could just put in like a clap. And as we just kind of come over here, so instead of having to record, you know, we could just kind of put in our different components here. So let's say, okay, I want to take these. I think I messed up. You know, and we're able to just kind of do step entry. So you could choose your quantize value, and then as we do this, you could just say, okay, I want this to be eighth note triplets, or so we'll just say eighth note triplets, and where do we want that to start? Let's say I want that to start on measure 2. So as we And now we could just... So that's just kind of a quick, easy way of being able to do step input when we have no actual data and you don't want to play the parts in live. Okay, so we had a question. It says, in the last live stream, you showed how to copy automation with a macro. I've set up the project logical editor, screenshot attached, and the macro that only contains both project logical editors. I have the selection tool selected, but nothing happens. I think it's an error because I'm thinking, how would the macro know which is the destination track? Something should be missing. So let's go take a look at it again. So I think it was maybe this project. So let's say I have my source track here with automation. All right, and I have a destination track here. So what we want to do is to copy all of the automation in this track and copy it to another track. So we want to make sure that we have the same automation tied in here. And so I have volume and linked panner, volume and linked panner. And we set up 2 different project logical editor presets. So the first one was save and copy. So make sure that this is set to select the automation, and then we're going to copy that automation. And then the next one is going to be under user presets to paste the automation. Okay, so, and I'll just check my macro. So let's go to key commands. So I think it's, see if I can find the right copy and paste multi-automation. So I just have these 2 steps here. If you find that you need to move it down, you could insert like a navigate down button. So if you wanted to come here, if it's not working for you, just hit the down button and then select and then add that in between. But when I do this and run the macro, and I found that you have to have like the object selection tool selected. I had the range tool selected after I thought I figured it out and was all proud of myself, and then realized I was wrong. So now I'll execute this macro, and we'll just say copy and paste multi-automation, and then it just automatically copies it over. So let me know if I did anything differently than you. I'll take another look just to make sure, check. One thing that kind of sometimes messes people up with is having the wrong function at the bottom of the project logical editor. I thought I took a look, but I'll look at it one more time from screenshots that you sent. But when we come to here, make sure that it's select as opposed to transform. It might be like the default one. All right, so we had a question come in from Soren. It says, I have a problem with a click in this project. At bar 88, it's cut between 2 takes, and it seems to become a click there. So I think I could play this just very subtly without giving away anything of the actual song. So. All right, and this is kind of a great use of a particular, like the auto fades function. So let's say here we have another event come in. I'll just play just a very small portion of it, and we'll probably hear a bit of a click when we go to this particular phrase. Okay, so as I play this, and I'm just going to take the click track off so you can hear the click. So as it transitions, we're going to have kind of a click. All right, so the easiest way to do this is Cubase has a great function where you don't have to do any editing. Is anytime that a new event ends or starts, that it could play just a small fade in, fade out, or crossfade between different sections, and we could activate this just by clicking here. So I'm going to just put in auto crossfade. So now that is active, and you won't see this represented. This is just a playback parameter. So it's not actually writing a physical fade in and fade out or crossfade on the event, but you could just simply, at this point where we had that click, we'll play again. And now you could just have kind of a seamless transition directly from there. So try, if you run into situations where maybe events are overlapping and are not crossfading as expecting, just simply turn on the auto fade settings and enable that, and then, you won't have clicks or pops. All right. So I see this is from a question mailed in about the maximizer. Okay, so the question is, the maximizer has few controls, but I think it's more complex than I can imagine. Can Greg discuss the maximizer? For example, optimize versus mix knobs, which is often the best relationship settings. Also, recover, release knobs in modern mode. It's not obvious what it does to the sound. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so I'll just put the maximizer on. All right, so when we, so let's say we'll take a look at the optimize versus mix. So let's say we'll listen to it without. So we can think of this as the actual level that we want to boost. So we can think of the optimize as the actual loudness of the signal, and the mix is almost like a parallel processing. So if we wanted to kind of blend the original signal in and blend it in with what we're doing with the maximizing algorithm to kind of boost, we could kind of set this level, and this is often good for making sure that transients are still speaking without everything getting too squashed. Now there's also a modern mode, and once we activate modern mode, and this is just kind of a different algorithm, a lot of people will prefer it for maybe more EDM dance type of projects, but we'll have kind of the release that'll be added, and this is the overall release time of when the actual parameter is going, when the maximizing, the level adjustment is going to actually stop. And recover just allows you to work in kind of with faster modes. So when it starts to release, the recovery just kind of increases the speed of that. So it could be pretty subtle, but and again, a lot of this is going to be for transients on 4 on the floor style kick drums. So it's going to be really well suited for that. So those are kind of some of those parameters. All right. So we see a question, how to share stereo out track inserts to a colleague or to another track. I'm using the save load function. Is there a better way? So probably, if we have a number of plugins that we want to like on our master bus here. So let's say, okay, that's probably the worst choice in the world, but sorry about that. But let's say, click on the correct button, that would help. All right, so let's say, okay, I want this as my, so that's my master bus, and I'm loving it. So again, I would probably just come right over here, right click, save a track preset, call it Stockholm. Hit OK. So now at any time we could just, let's say I go to my media bay, then we'll go home. And if I wanted that plugin chain on any particular preset, I could go to user presets, to track presets, audio, and we'll see the Stockholm, the one we just created. And I'll just drag and drop that on. We open up, and all the plugins and EQs are recalled. So that's probably the easiest way to get those particular settings carried over. Soren also had a question about in Wavelab with the detection. So I was playing with this and I was not getting the kind of expected results. So I was going to reach out to some of the team in Hamburg, see if there is more of an explanation for this. But let's say, okay, so when we go into our error detection, so let's say, okay, I just wanted to do this for maybe a selected, a current selection. So where we could come over here and at this point, detect the errors. So as we do this, we'll just say, okay, we want to, we'll just say, let's go ahead and search for errors. There's no errors found. So I think a lot of times when we're working with this, it may make sense to think of this working more for a particular smaller section. So let's zoom in where it looks like it had found an error here. So if we go to find next error, so there's no other error. So, but think of this as like maybe a quick spot correction. Like if you do hear something that you think might be an error, that this is a more of kind of spot correction. So let's just say I'll do a larger. So no errors found. So let's see if we choose entire file. So it seems like when we choose entire file that we get less reliable results. So maybe try coming over here and choosing define as the current selection and doing, let's search. So, this is going to be more for smaller selections. So it seems like, it shouldn't have that many errors. So I'll try to get more of a confirmation with this. But, generally when I do it personally, I just do kind of the global analysis of the event. And, just say analyze. And then you could find, here we could find peaks, loudness, pitch, extra, and if you need DC offsets and errors here. So here it's found kind of 1 point, and then we could choose to focus on that particular point. So maybe that's a better workflow for what you want to do, Soren. All right. Let's make sure I didn't miss any of the questions. All right, so I'm going to go back to our live questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. All right. Okay. All right. So I see probably clarification with the naming question. It says, how can we find at the time of multiple audio mixdown not able to find which two tracks having the same names? Naming scheme gives error and not to be able to find and export tracks with the same name. Okay. So let's say if we go to the naming scheme, so I'm not sure what the naming scheme is that you have, but sometimes if we come over to the naming scheme here, let's go ahead and I'll just move this. So let's say, okay, I want the name. So we could just take our name here. Let's go ahead and then you could have free text, the channel number. So, these things can all be kind of added and maybe, so let's say if we do have different names, try to add maybe the separator. And then there's also different digits. So, so try changing the naming scheme. If you want to send me, email me a screenshot of your naming scheme and the two tracks that are kind of in conflict, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But, try to also, as you come here, if you could send a screenshot of what your naming scheme is set to, I might be able to help a little easier with that. And you can send that again to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. So we see question. Can I ask where is Rewire in Cubase? So Rewire was a function that's been discontinued by the developer who created it, so it's no longer supported. So that's why we don't see it in Cubase 12. But if you have Cubase 11, and there's a lot of stuff that won't necessarily be carried over for additional, more contemporary operating systems and processors. So, but you could check why Reason Studios or Propeller Heads have stopped developing in it. See, Michael Teams is just recommending just, find the tracks with the same name and change the name of one of the tracks. See, Terry Gray just saying, wow, I didn't know about auto crossfade. And Jeff Sabelsky's X is a great key to use for crossfades. So, yeah. Okay, just appreciate all the moderation going on. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if more questions kind of come in. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions that were asked today. I hope that everyone's learned a tip or trick. And also, just a quick reminder, we'll go for about 2 hours on Tuesday for our live stream, and then starting about 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern, about 2 hours into it, we will switch over to a Zoom meetup. So we'll be having our kind of our Zoom meetup. So it's a great way to kind of meet different people, and it's always a wonderful discussion. So we look forward to seeing a lot of new faces, and people have done it before. It's always really great fun. All right, so we see, just see a question from Jazz Dude or a comment. Please make it possible for new Cubase 12 owners to have a license for older Cubase versions, like we old dongle users have. You know, the reason why there was always the backward compatibility was for projects that people had. So if you're a new user, you know, and there's a lot of discussion with this. If you're a new user, you don't have existing projects that you would need to pull up for archival purposes. So that was kind of the thinking behind it. That, you know, if you have, if you're buying Cubase 12 for the first time, that, you probably don't have existing archival projects, but if you were upgrading from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, that you would obviously have projects in previous versions to that. So at that point, that's why you could still maintain your Cubase 11 license and do that. Realize it, it doesn't make everyone happy, but, that was kind of the thinking. I see Jazzy just mentioning with the Cubase 11 license, I can install and open any older Cubase Pro, like Cubase 10 or 9.5 or 7 or even 6. So, yeah. So I think that as we go forward, probably, if there's a Cubase 13, a Cubase 14, that it will open up, Cubase 12 probably going forward. So, but that's kind of the thinking that they had behind it. So wait, see if there's any other questions that come in. If not, we will wrap up a little early. Thanks for all the great, wonderful questions that everyone asked today. I hope it was useful and everyone learned some good tips and tricks. And again, we'll be doing this. If you're watching this for, if you haven't been a part of this series, we'll be doing this again. We usually do this on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. All right. So we see question, any word on whether all Steinberg plugins will move to the new Steinberg Activation Manager? So, they're slowly, I think that they're ahead of schedule of what they thought they would be at, Groove Agent, Groove Agent and Backbone, and I saw Fractured, I think, are all kind of on a new licensing system. So, but other ones are kind of in the works. So, currently I believe it's going to be, we have Dorico, Cubase, Nuendo, Wavelab, Spectral Layers, I think Fractured, Soundset for Backbone, as well as Groove Agent and Groove Agent and Backbone. So, so they're making their way. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of deep code in there to have to work. So, all right, we'll see if there's any last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap up. Usually about a 20-second delay from when I talk to when it actually you guys hear. So I'll wait just a little bit. All right, so I think we're done with the questions. I want to thank everyone for all your wonderful questions. Hope that everyone's learned something new, and we'll be back on Tuesday, and we hope to see a lot of new people on the Zoom meetup. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye.